things before we begin. First of all, this golden form here, most of you know what this is. This is our goldenrod. It has all of our faculty events on one side. On the other is highlights of specific events throughout the semester. Now we're towards the end of this semester, but I point this out to you now so you can be on the lookout for this in the spring. And we publish this every semester. We distribute it to all the units, so keep a lookout for this. It's a handy, easy, quick reference so you can know what we're doing here at the CTE. Before you leave today, if you would fill out one of these evaluation forms that's also on your table and leave it with Reed at the front desk. This helps us maintain some quality control. And here at the bottom, question number 4 is really important to us. What can we be doing here at the CTE to help address faculty needs? And that's an important question for us. So if you will take some time and fill that out before you go, that would be great. Without further delay, we'll hand it over to our presenter today, Barbara Jacoby.
Thank you, Jeremy, and it is just great to be here with you today. I am a big partner and fan of the Center for Teaching Excellence at the University of Maryland. I do workshops with them every semester and really enjoy that interaction. So I am really happy to be able to have the opportunity to engage with you today around the topic of critical reflection. And I actually broadened the topic, so I know it says there specifically related to experiential learning. But I really want to talk today about how to deepen learning in all courses, whether or not there's an experiential learning component, through critical reflection. And so it's one of my very favorite topics to talk about, because I think it really is. It really applies to all of the areas that we teach in. Do we assume that everybody knows each other, or would it be good to quickly go around and do some introduction? Let's quickly go around and just give us your name and the department you're with. I would love that, because that will really help me as well. So please start, Teresa. Great, thank you. That's terrific. It's also really wonderful that there's such a nice blend of academic and student affairs here. That seems to be really so much more natural here at USC than it is in other places. So just know that and appreciate that. And I know it has something to do with your reporting lines, but it's obviously got more to do with it than that. So in addition to the service learning courses, the many service learning courses that I've taught over the years, I have recently taught 2 courses that involve critical reflection in a very big way. One is the second year doctoral seminar for students in our Student Affairs Higher Ed program, and that course is around professional issues, in which they select the issues that they think are most important for them to learn about and decide how they're going to go about learning that and how they are going to be critically reflective practitioners and faculty members around those issues. And the second is a capstone course that I teach for undergraduate students who've been very involved in service and leadership and civic engagement throughout their years. And it's called Now What? Composing a Life of Meaning and Purpose. So the academic content of that course is social change. We study social change strategies. They do a service learning project that involves one of the social change strategies and reflect on its success, and also do a lot of reflection about making meaning of what they've learned in their undergraduate experience, and then how that meaning is going to inform decisions that they're going to make throughout their lives as they compose their lives of meaning and purpose. So I got into teaching that course because I heard way too many students who've been through service learning experiences even, things like, I learned a lot from working with the community. Like, so what does that mean? And I heard students, who study abroad, well, I just learned so much from being in another culture. Well, we really need to prompt students to go much, much, much deeper than that. So students just very often come away from our courses with a vague sense of the impact that their experiences have had on them, but not really aware of their own learning, what it is they've learned, how they learned it, and the implications of that for being lifelong learners. So for me, there's a real missed opportunity here for students to learn about and use their own learning processes, their own reflective processes, to develop the metacognitive skills that enable us to question and make meaning of our experiences and our acquired knowledge. So that's what leads me to critical reflection. So I am here to talk with you a little bit about what is critical reflection, to offer an overview of the various forms. So what does it look like in the classroom? And then quickly walk you through the steps of designing and facilitating critical reflection in classes, and even certainly in out-of-class experiences as well. I'm very informal, so if you have a question or something to share, just please don't hesitate to raise your hand, and we'll just go for it. And since this is a workshop on critical reflection, I'd like to walk the walk a little bit by asking you to take a moment to reflect on these questions. So think a little bit about what are some of the myths that faculty members hold about critical reflection, because trust me, we do. And what doubts or anxieties, do you have about facilitating critical reflection in your classes or the experiences that you work on with students? And then, so what's the most intriguing thing to you about engaging students in critical reflection? Or so why did you come here to this workshop, besides the good food and the good company? So take a couple minutes and just think about those for a moment. So I know some of you are still writing and thinking and eating, and that's all good, but so what are some of those myths? What came to mind? You can just kind of shout them out. Yeah, please.
I think one of the myths is that we think that students know how to critically reflect or critically.
That, I'll tell you, this is a true story from my Now What class. And again, these are juniors and seniors, mostly seniors who've been very active in community service and service learning and leadership. And the first day of class, we went over what is critical reflection, some of the stuff we're going to talk about right here today. And I asked them, okay, so how many of you have had at least one class here at the University of Maryland where you would say you've engaged in this critically reflective process? How many? How many? Raise their hands. Zero. And so I think that is a very accurate, I'm not so sure it's a myth. It may be a myth, but in some cases it's also accurate. Yeah, what else? What else? What do you think faculty members kind of think? There's no time for this. Yeah, we have no time for that. That's right, we got to cover the material. No time to reflect. Forget that. Yeah, it's fluffy is another one. It's really fluffy. That's not academically rigorous stuff. Yeah. Cannot assess it. That's right. It's like assessing, can you assess a love letter? Can you grade a love letter? No, we're not asking students to talk about their feelings. here. They can. We want them. They can write about their feelings, but we also want them to write and tell us about and reflect on what they think about their feelings and where they came from, and whether they want to hold on to those values that they've always had or not. So yeah, exactly. Other myths? Anything else out there? Yeah. So the second, doubts, anxieties, like I'm a little nervous about this. Okay. Yeah, Carrie.
How to scale it for a large class?
You can't do this in a large class. That ain't gonna work. Others?
Fear of losing control of the course goes off in a total tangential direction that you can't get back.
We will come back to that one, but yes, oh yeah, they're going to take it out there, and I'm gonna lose control. And again, not gonna be able to cover that material.
I don't know enough about it to be able to guide other people.
There you go. There you said it. There you said it. Those are really, yeah, certainly ones I've heard before. Okay, so what's kind of exciting about it? So what brought you here to wanna learn more? Yeah. It's how we learn about ourselves as learners, and we want our students to be lifelong learners, right? Yeah. Yeah. What else? Yeah, please.
Me, it's being with the students when they look back and look at where they are now, and that moment when they realize that something has happened during that time, and they get a sense of who they were, and who they are now, or introduce that sharing that moment with them is quite moving and gives you some satisfaction that something went right. You don't entirely know, which is one of the things I wrote here.
Yes, we love those aha moments, and it really does give us one of those rare opportunities to watch them grow. Yeah, it's fabulous.
I think all of that can provide feedback to help you guide the course too.
Definitely, absolutely, definitely, because if students are critically reflecting on course content, I also encourage them to critically reflect with me about the course, and I learn a tremendous amount from that. It's not just ticking off a few boxes in an evaluation at the end of the semester. It's thinking about what not only what did I learn in this class, but what is it about how we went about learning that informs me who I am as a learner, and to develop those the practice of critical reflection. It's great, yeah.
Seems like a way to leverage, that's the right way, that's the right word, leverage learning, leave nothing on the table, make the most out of it, making sure it's already doing anyway, something like that.
It's absolutely true. There are so many. It's those missed opportunities that students we think that we've given them the kernel of what it is that they can learn, and then we leave it up to them. And particularly if we're talking about students early on, first year sophomores, more structure is needed. We need to guide that reflective process and structure it. So. Well, there's lots of exciting things, and I hope you will leave with many, many more. So let's get down to it. So just what is it that she's talking about here? So simply put, critical reflection is the powerful process of making meaning out of a purposeful combination of experiences, and they don't have to necessarily be experiences outside the classroom, classroom-based experiences, reflective experiences, and academic content. It adds depth and breadth to meaning by challenging those simplistic conclusions that we hate to hear, comparing varying perspectives, examining causality, and raising more and more challenging questions. So without critical reflection, students can come away from our courses with oversimplified views of very complex issues, or cling to their own single perspective without considering a wide range of others. It really makes students challenge their a priori assumptions and develops those critical and integrative thinking skills, which are obviously central to the college experience. More specifically, critical reflection, and I use this definition with my students, is the process, because it is a process, it's not a product, it's a process of analyzing reconsidering and questioning. So really critical verbs there. Analyzing, reconsidering, and questioning our experiences prior to the class as well as in the class and in the future within a broad range, broad context of issues and then content knowledge related to a particular course. You know, we always hear experience is the best teacher, but you know what? That's not necessarily the case. Experience without reflection, I mean, it can be a very problematic teacher. Students can, in fact, learn the wrong things. It is possible to reinforce our stereotypes if we don't have the opportunity to really learn about issues and people who are different from us. Again, to develop those simplistic solutions to complex problems. And how many times have we seen this one just generalizing inaccurately based on really incomplete data? So those of us who teach service learning courses have heard statements like I have heard, well, homeless people would be able to get off the street if they just get a job. So, would that it would be that simple. So I really love John Dewey's definition of critical reflection. Again, I use this with my students. I introduce it on the first day of class in both my classes, the classes that I teach. And I find his definition to be very nuanced and really useful. And for Dewey, so critical reflection is the active, persistent, and careful consideration. Again, I love those adjectives. Active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief we might hold or a supposed form of knowledge, and their supposed form of knowledge, because we're really are challenging students to examine their knowledge, that metacognitive process. So in the light of the grounds that support it and the further conclusions to which it tends. So again, I think this is a wonderful definition of metacognition. It comes from how we think, by the way, which is in your reference list. So I would like to turn now to a model that produced by our colleagues, Eiler, Giles, and Schmid, again in your handout, that has guided many of us in beginning to think through the process of how critical reflection might work in our classes. Many of us have used it in service learning for years, but it's also very useful for us in all types of courses across disciplines. So critical reflection is continuous. We were just talking about this morning in the context of U100, about U101, rather we call it U100 on my campus. So I always get it confused of U101 about how important it is not just to go through the whole course, do a service project, and then tack a reflection paper on at the end. Because students will know that. They will know it's tacked on at the end. So I think for the deepest learning to occur, reflection needs to be ongoing. Again, we're talking about developing the lifelong habit and practice of critical reflection. So it should occur throughout the course and not just at the end in a final paper. It should be connected, because connected reflection builds bridges among content learning, personal reactions or reflections, and firsthand experiences, either in the field, in a lab, in the classroom. And when intentionally connected with academic content, students find that field experiences can make theories real, can turn statistics into people and situations, and raise questions that just might not otherwise be raised. And then critical reflection is also challenging because it poses old questions in new ways, is intentionally designed to reveal new perspectives, and raises new questions, more and more new questions. Again, reflection always opens more doors than it closes. And again, that's one of those things that makes faculty go, oh, I'm not going to do that. So it avoids those simplistic conclusions that we were talking about. And it's also, I think, really important to, we talked about this a lot in talking about U101, to really carefully assess the level at which our students are. We gotta teach the students that we got. And we need to make sure that we are not giving them reflection that is too challenging, or they're not going to take the risks that learning requires. We're not gonna get them to do that. And if the reflection is is too simplistic for them, and they just don't, they don't really think that this is challenging enough, then we're not bringing them to, as the director of our Center for Teaching Excellence at Maryland likes to say, to their learning edge. They're just going to give you back those stock answers if we're not challenging enough. So it's that balance of challenge and support. And then critical reflection needs to be contextualized to ensure that the form and process of reflection are guided by the context. So the topics and activities that we choose for reflection need to be meaningful in relation to the course content and the experiences that students are having, and link to the learning outcomes of the course. Because students, again, will pick up really, really quickly if the learning outcomes are here and the content's here and the reflection's over there. So we really need to be integral, and we'll look more about that. And you also, I think, we also need to be thoughtful in the way of context of what else is going on in students' lives. So we're not going to get the deepest reflection the day before spring break, or probably even in the middle of midterms, or the day before last class before finals, but also about what's going on in the world. As I was teaching my Now What class, and I came in and we're going to take a really deep look at some of the issues with why American democracy might not be working as well as we'd like it to. So that was going to be the context of the class. So for that day, and it was back in February, and my students came in and I started talking about democracy, and one of them looked at me and said, "We want to talk about Trayvon." Because the whole Trayvon Martin business had just unfolded, and things, it was just spinning, out all over the news. And we want to talk about Trayvon. They were so focused and so concerned that if I had forced them into reflecting about, American democracy, they might not have, they wouldn't have been with it. And so we took some time, and I asked them what were their concerns, and then eventually tried my best to relate it to the course content and get back to it. But if we hadn't learned, if I didn't realize what was really going on for them, then I think they would have been going here and I could have been going there, and you're not going to get the kind of of reflection that we are after. So in summary, reflection is critical when it's carefully and intentionally designed. You'll hear that a lot, careful and intentional, designed to generate learning by applying theory to practice, examining causality, and raising deeper and deeper questions. It deepens learning by challenging simplistic conclusions, comparing different perspectives, and questioning acquired knowledge and beliefs. And then it also documents student learning by producing evidence of learning and assessment. So that contradicts that myth right there. So questions so far before we move on to look at what critical reflection really can look like in the classroom? Yeah, please. Yeah, go for it, yeah. Sure.
It's from education, and it has to do with that concept of, I love the way that you said it, and I hadn't really thought of it, that what happens if students just have an experience and don't have the reflection, then they can draw overly simplistic conclusions. And in education, this is my home base, when we put students out in schools to observe what's happening in classrooms, we found that was one of the hesitancy of teachers, because the teachers whose classrooms are interns or students would be in, the student would come in for 2 hours a week to observe, and a lot of teachers were very uncomfortable with students then leaving to go write up their summary of what happened.
Very big example.
So we actually then have instituted on-site debriefing sessions to teach them. When students go into a school, we have a debriefing session with an experienced teacher before they leave the school, so that besides the students writing up for their professor what they saw relates to the theory they're learning, we've gotten the context from the school people as well as to here are the things you didn't know that were impacted my decision about why I handled that situation with that child in that way, for example.
Yeah, but what a learning opportunity. And then again, that teacher then models for students what a reflective teacher would be. Yeah, that's terrific. That's great. So as I go on, keep in your mind what's a missed opportunity. There's one great example. Missed opportunity for student learning that's occurred in the context of your courses or your work with students outside the classroom. So just kind of thinking, well, what did they not get that we hoped and thought that they would get? So just keep that in mind, kind of as we go on. So I do want to talk about the modes of critical reflection. And again, they're not mutually exclusive, but they're kind of four general modes that we talk about: speaking, writing, activities, and media. And so speaking can take many forms. I mean, there's the obvious ones, class discussions and presentations, but there's also asking students to teach a class, and this can even be done in a larger class because they can work in teams, and providing thought leadership. So for example, in the Now What class, we study social change strategies. So each of the students becomes the thought leader on a particular social change strategy. And so I give them the structure, and they come in, be prepared to talk about what the strategy is, what situations it's best used in, what are its pros and cons, what are some examples throughout history and current practice that has been used, they field the questions, and of course I'm there to support and help them. But so how much reflection goes in to our preparation for classes and leading students in reflection, in outside class activity. So that'll give you an idea of the kind of reflection that they would then go through in preparing for that. I also like another kind of speaking activity I like to engage students in is the elevator speech. So you put yourself in the position that you are going to have 1 minute to convince somebody of something that's very important to you in whatever field you're going to go into. So you're at a scientific conference, and you have 1 minute to ride up the elevator in the hotel where the conference is being held with somebody from NIH who has the potential to fund your big idea. So you have 1 minute to explain that idea. So the kind of reflective process that would go into that, or you're a nursing student, and you have the opportunity by chance to ride up the elevator with the doctor. And so you have the opportunity, you have 1 minute to explain to that doctor why what you think the patient needs might be different from what the doctor does. And so it really, so if the students can do this individually, share their speeches, with one another and polish each other's, and you can give them even like a little, 3 or 4 question rubric, what was the point you got, how confident, was the speaker. And so, but great reflective process goes into thinking about what I could say in 1 minute. And it's something you could really do inside a class. Debates and deliberation are both great examples. We were talking about this earlier also with Dan. I was talking with Dan Friedman about the context of doing that in U101, where students could either debate an issue or deliberate, and just to learn the idea of, if we're talking about public problem solving, well, it's done through, through citizens deliberating, about the problem. In a debate, we try to defeat the other person, and we try to win. We put our best ideas out there, we try to beat them. As we've seen, unfortunately, too much of lately. But deliberation, we put out our best thinking to invite others in to help us improve it. And we take the best of yours and the best of mine, and we put it together, and we try to come up with a common solution. So we get a great in-class activity for students to consider. And then sometimes even after either a debate or a deliberation, then students can put their solution, particularly with deliberation, into writing, and write a letter to the editor of a local or influential national publication, or write a letter to a politician or other elected official. So all kinds of great stuff there. Writing is usually the predominant form of reflection that we think of in academic courses. And so if, in fact, clear, concise, expository writing is one of the course goals, then writing would be a great form of reflection to use. And so journals we often think of, but there's also problem analysis, case studies, essays, again, those letters to the editor, press releases, drafting legislation. And so the double entry journal is a tried and true method. If you're interested in this, after you hear my little description, you can just Google double entry journal and you'll find lots of formats online. So although there are lots of ways to do it, generally we provide prompts to the students. For one page of the journal, they write about their subjective reflections. So, you know, what do I think? What do I feel after doing this or experiencing this or reading this? And then on the other side of the journal, so if that's on the right hand, on the left hand side, we would provide prompts for more objective reflections, analytical thinking and writing. And then students then can see that reflection can be both about our feelings and values and then about them more analytical. Yeah, Carrie.
Some examples of those objective questions.
Oh, let's see. Give me. I know you've told me a little bit about what you teach. Give me an example of.
So I think operations. So how do companies deliver products? So one exercise that I have them do is to go to startups and watch how they prepare a drink and what are the opportunities for errors and how they correct them. And I'm thinking something like that could be,
Mm-hmm.
think
Oh,
about
yeah.
the process in their life and where do you see opportunities for errors and prevent those errors, what kind of steps do you need to take to do that? So what would a double entry journal?
Okay, that's helpful. So on the subjective side, if using the Starbucks example, the students could actually get a drink at the Starbucks. So how did you feel? How did you feel that you were treated? Did you like this experience? Would you go back? What would make you go back? What didn't you like? And then on the objective side, say that they have read, I would relate it to material that they had read. And I would ask them, okay, so you just read this author's perspective on what's the best way to manage customer service. So how did that theory hold up in practice? Did you see it? Did it work? Because one of the things that's really outstanding for students in any field is to provide a theoretical piece, have them test it either through experience doing or and then to reflect on on whether that theory held up in practice.
In my case, I probably would do a lot less on the subjective side than a lot of other classes, and it could be purely objective.
Yep.
Like one or two
Yep.
lines on the subjective and purely objective, it's easier to grade and easier to guide.
Absolutely, and so one of the guidelines that one of my faculty colleagues looks at, if we have time, we'll look at that example, in a little bit, and she teaches a course on the psychology of domestic violence. So in the spring semester, the students learn about the statistics, the theories behind why we have domestic violence and what are the societal implications and all those things. A lot of the numbers and stuff, and then and they're advanced psychology students. So then they go in the spring. They go into a battered women's shelter, and they actually do some group work there, and then so the reflection papers that she has them write, 2-page reflection paper each week, and she says no more than one paragraph can be about the what. So what you experienced, how you felt, only one paragraph of description. The rest has to be analysis. So we could be that specific, and we should be. We really should be. Particularly more structure, more scaffolding, more specificity for students early on, as freshmen and sophomores for sure. So I would, and then I got lots of other examples, but I'll go on and just run through the other two modes. So activities or reflection through action works well for many students by providing variety, and if it's done in groups, it helps to develop teamwork skills. So again, it goes back to your learning outcomes. So if one of the learning outcomes for your class or project is for students to learn how to work collaboratively to solve problems or to get something done as a group, then you might want them involved in activities as far as, reflection. If writing is preeminent, then of course you might go with writing, speaking in a communication class. So, that's how you might, one of the criteria you might use to, to determine. But, so there's any number of, of ways to do that. Having students work together in teams on problem-based learning works really well. So problem-based learning, I know some of you are very familiar with it, is sort of like the more intellectual cousin of case study. In case study, we kind of give students all the facts and sometimes even the solution. This is what we do in law school. We give them even, the resolution, and they have to analyze, why that came about, what were the factors that brought that resolution about. In problem-based learning, we give them many fewer facts and much less guidance, and ask them to we basically give them the kernel of a problem and have them come up with potential solutions, and then the reflection can be about which of the solutions and what might we take from this solution or that solution. Works very, very well in large classes because you can divide students up into small groups, and then each can share what they think is the best element of their solution, and they can, as a larger group, put something together. So that works really, really well as well. Simulations and role plays are just excellent. So here's an example from engineering. So students are given a scenario in which individuals have different perspectives on the same situation, and each student takes a role, and they enact the scenario, and the roles are sometimes that have conflicting interests or objectives. And so the engineering example is that the students in this intro to engineering class, is a real life class, actually design and build a playground in a neighborhood. And so the roles that the students take might be children, parents, older neighbors who might have a very different perspective on the playground than the children, elected officials, school personnel, the owners of local businesses, and then after the role play, students critique and evaluate the role. This also can work. It can work well in a class of 300 students, because you could have 7 or 8 students enacting the role in front of the whole group, and then the other students in groups critiquing the scenario. So it's certainly there are lots of things that can work in large classes. So the last example I'll mention is media, and this offers opportunities for students who sometimes might find it more difficult to reflect really deeply on values, on their long held or family's values through nonverbal means. So collages, drawings, photo or video essays, really effective. Musical compositions, art forms, poetry. I mean, all of those can be very effective and also reflect different talents that students have. And another thing you can do is give students an option. They have to reflect on a particular topic or issue, but they could do it in different ways. And so they could do it through artistic means versus a presentation versus a written paper. So that's certainly something that you can do. So the use of media becomes even more powerful because students can then revisit what they did early in the semester. They can do it, look at it immediately and then later on, and sometimes they really can see some differences in how they felt earlier, versus later. Writing can work for that as well. So, questions about the forms of reflection, anything, or our examples that you'd like to share? Well, let's go on to the steps, and so you have a curriculum map in your handout. So it kind of guides you through the steps of developing critical reflection in your in a class or in a program. So the steps, they look pretty simple, about identifying your learning outcomes and designing activities, obviously, to achieve the outcomes, actually doing it, engaging the students, and then the assessment. So of course they're very simple words wrapped around a complex process. So let's take kind of a little quick closer look at what that looks like. So critical reflection is something you would want to consider for outcomes around some of the more complex dimensions of reasoning, like things like developing enhanced understanding, questioning received knowledge, as well as theories and assumptions, examining causality, and evaluating potential solutions to complex problems. So you wouldn't invoke critical reflection for things like acquiring basic data or memorizing facts. And yeah, sometimes we do need to do that. I mean, we need to learn something. We have to have something to use in our, something to reflect about. So we need some knowledge, we need some facts. So it's not necessarily ideal for that specifically, but certainly can enhance student learning about those and help put it into context for them, because facts without context, we know it's not relevant. That's not important for us. And then step 2 is, again, designing those reflection activities to achieve the learning outcomes. So this really involves making choices that are informed by the learning outcomes. So when I work with a group of faculty fellows on my campus who are designing service learning classes. But whether it was a service learning class or another kind of class, we spend the first 3 sessions that we work together, and these are 2-hour sessions, developing learning outcomes that can be assessed. Because one of the issues that came up earlier is, one of the myths is you can't assess it. Well, you can't assess it if you don't have your learning outcomes stated in accessible terms. So we can't assess whether someone understands something or other, but we can assess whether they can articulate it or demonstrate it. So we want to use those action verbs. And then designing activities that then need to be related to the context and also the abilities of the students. So it's very effective over the course of a semester to combine several different kinds of reflection activities or mechanisms to offer variety, as well as to recognize students' different learning styles. And so again, I would refer you to the curriculum map as you might want to work through this whole process. And then, of course, comes to, well, we got to do it. And so as we provide students with prompts for reflection, which can be done in many forms, so questions, topics, open-ended sentence stems, quotes, all these work really well. Our ideal, what we want to do, is to guide students step by step, incrementally, to higher levels of complexity of thinking, analyzing, and reasoning. So to give you an example from my class, from the Now What class that I was telling you about, on the first, and then again, these are juniors and seniors. So very early in the semester, I asked them to write a 2-page reflection on why do you want to change the world? Well, they know that. They can do that. But later on, as we do more reflection and more thinking and more reading, later on in the semester, I ask them, okay, you've written out why you want to change the world. How has that changed since the beginning of the semester? And it does. And then and open the door for that. And then I ask them, why does it matter to know why? And that's the metacognitive piece, because you really get them thinking about their thinking, get them to think about what brought them to write what they did, in this case, and why they want to change the world. And it's that metacognitive piece that really, really gets them thinking. So, yeah, of course, Carrie.
Talk about the importance of prompts, which right there with you. But again, my question is, what are these prompts? And I have some. Is there, you have a number of different references here. Are there one of them that you would suggest has a good kind of, not template, but some ideas where you
Do you have the list here? Let me peek and see. And very often these are based in your curriculum or in your content area rather than. Yeah, I'm looking to see. Yeah, there are. As a matter of fact, I would say for general prompts, I would look at the Bowd, Keogh, and Walker. Certainly, Ash, Clayton, and Atkinson, up the second one down. Yep, might have some, and Eiler, Giles, and Schmid. That's where the 4 C's of critical reflection come from. Eiler, Eyler, Giles and Schmid. Sorry, let me see if there's anything else here. Here's another great one. On the back, Paul and Elder, the Miniature Guide to Critical Thinking, criticalthinking.org is a great website. It's the foundation for critical thinking, and there's some really good examples on there as well. So those are some that I would go for. Yeah, sure. No, great question. Okay, so I would. So in order for this scaffolded continuous reflection to work, we need to be providing feedback along the way. They can't just do it and then do it and then do it. We need to have the feedback cyclical. And so I spend a fair amount of time every week grading. I do 2-page reflection papers, required 2-page reflection papers, and I spend a fair amount of time giving feedback to students. And very often, the feedback that I give them is in the form of deeper questions. So they'll state something, and I will ask them why, or where did this come from, or do you really mean this? And so then I look for that again in the next essay. And so the essays that I require, each builds on the next, and I ask them, and I look for them to incorporate the feedback that I give them. And yes, it is time consuming, but sometimes I think it's also, I also do formative assessment, like at the end of a class where I'm thinking, I'm not sure they got this. So I'll just say, tear off a piece of paper and write on there, what's your biggest takeaway from today's class, or what really worked for you from today's class, or like, what do you think you came in and you're more confused about now than you were when you came in, or whatever the question is that comes to your mind. You don't have to plan this in advance. And you collect those, and they can be anonymous or not. I give them the option to put their name on it or not if they want to. But I learn a tremendous amount from those. And sometimes I do change things up based on what they say. And I will come in the next week and say, well, we were going to do this. You'll see what it says on the syllabus, but I think I want to change that up a little bit based on some of your feedback from last week. And so that tells them that I'm listening and I'm critically reflecting on my own practice. So we're walking the walk. And boy, do they know when you're walking the walk or if you're just talking the talk. Oh man, can they pick that up really fast. So the last step, of course, we can't get away without assessment, and that has already come up as an issue. And very, very common question, like, how will I know it when I see it? And so there are many ways to assess reflection, and rubrics really work well. There are some great critical thinking rubrics. I give my students, at the very beginning of the semester, I do 2 things. The first class, we spend almost the whole class talking about what is critical reflection and what does it mean to make meaning. And I give them a rubric by which I am going to grade their critical reflection throughout the semester. And so what does it look like? And I give them examples. What does it look like, or what I want? Then I also, on the very first day of class, I give them an essay prompt. It's a short paragraph, and I say, write an essay, no more than 2 pages, 1 to 2 pages, in response to the prompt. And it's basically what the class is about. So, what are the values upon which you're going to, build your life, compose your life of meaning and purpose. And I said it's not going to be graded, but it will be assessed. And so they do it. They give them to me. I read them. I have a rubric that I use to assess them. I give them, in the second class, I give them their essay back, and I give them the rubric. And I said, okay, so this is, how you did, and this is how I'm grading it, and I'm going to give you this same essay on the last day of class. And I'm going to use the same rubric. So exactly, I don't want them to spend their time second guessing what I want them to do or what this critical reflection business is. This is what it is. And so I do grade the last one, and they then can see the comparison between their first score and their last, and also what they wrote and how much more sophisticated, and generally it is, at the end, and so they can see how they've learned and grown and developed the habit of critical reflection.
Is that the why do I want to change the world essay, or is it?
It's a little bit different. Yeah, it's a little bit different, but it's similar to that. It's really the whole class is really about looking very deeply at the values that you hold and deciding whether you want to continue to hold on to those values and whether they are going to be the values upon which you're going to compose your life of meaning and purpose. So that really helps a lot. Rubrics really work. So.
Source, you have developed rubrics or words, not developing rubrics, but it's great to see what other people do.
Yeah, there are some, as a matter of fact. You know, what I'll do, Jeremy, if that's okay, I'll send you a couple of rubrics. So do you know everybody who's here today?
Or if you would like to receive that email from Barbara, I will have a notebook here, and you just put your email there, and I'll make sure you get it. Yeah, we can definitely
Thank
do
you
that.
so much.
That would be great. Does anybody have a blank piece of paper? I'll write myself a note to do this. Any kind of pictures, that will really help me. Oh, thank you. And that I will write myself the note. But I want to give you an example of a really simple. Oh, thank you, Carrie. Perfect. Okay. All right, rubrics to Jeremy. That's all I need. I have something here. That is great. So let's take a look at an example of how all this plays out in a real life course. This is the course on the psychology of domestic violence that I mentioned. And so the students, there are learning outcomes. I won't read them to you here, as you've got them in your handout. That every learning outcome in the course is not designed to be achieved through critical reflection, but these are three that are. And it has to be, and she uses the terms to demonstrate understanding of the complex dynamics and effects of domestic violence, the various approaches, and then students will analyze, there's another one of those great action verbs for reflection, will analyze the effects of gender, culture, race, ethnicity, etc. On domestic violence victims. Then the students write a weekly service analysis paper, 2 double-spaced pages, as I'd mentioned, no more than 1 paragraph of description. I took that right from my colleague Karen O'Brien, who teaches this class, and that it must include multiple references. So that's how she describes what the paper is, and that we're talking about critical reflection. In this case, it's a service experience, but it certainly wouldn't have to be. Certainly could be just based on readings. So critical reflection on, in this case, the service experience related to the readings. And she explains she gives the students some examples of topics that they can write about. She goes as far as to structure it that way. And then here is the grading schema, which I give you because I think it's eminently adaptable to a course in any discipline for critical reflection. So this is for the 2-page reflection paper. So 4 points is for an exceptionally thoughtful critique that truly integrates course concepts and research into an analysis of the experience. Those are the important words. Exceptional, thoughtful, truly integrates, and analysis. So students know exactly what she's looking for. 3 points, well, it's a very good, thoughtful critique that applies, but not that integrated piece, applies course concepts and research. 2 points, average to below average analysis that does not integrate course concepts and research in a thorough manner. And then 1 point, well, you did it, but you weren't very thoughtful about it. So very clear, easy to use, simple, can be adapted in a zillion ways. And so I'm going to stop there where we have at least a few minutes. And knowing that this is a seminar on reflection, I will give you these questions to think about. Won't make you think about them now, but you certainly can as we address any kind of questions and hear other comments and feedback from you all. But kind of like, how do you feel now about some of those questions we looked at the very beginning? So, questions? Comments? What occurs to you? Yeah. Or you can answer any of these if you want to.
So I'm excited about this. I can see how can use this, but I need a support group to get me through it. Does that make sense? Like, I need someone, and I need to start with baby steps, but I need a support group so that I don't feel like I'm
I think that would be a fabulous thing to happen, and it could be as informal as, a monthly brown bag or coffee in the morning, and just, so what have you done, what's worked, I think that's a great idea. Yay. That's great. It's a big topic for the faculty fellows that I work with related to service learning. It's like, what is that reflection stuff and how did it go? And oh my God, I did one and it didn't go well. As Carrie and I were talking before as we were having lunch, that, one of the things I love about the Center for Teaching Excellence on my campus, and certainly I see it here, I already hear it and see it here, is that we can sit down with one another and talk about, this really worked today. I feel so good. And oh my God, did this not work for me? And learn from each other. And that's what I love. I love about it. So we can even critically reflect together.
I was going through the myths that, I think a lot of the things that you led everyone through addressed a lot of the issues of, they can't be assessed, that students are tested, all those kinds of things. The one that's the hardest one for me to tell people is about time, because I really think you are exactly right.
Yeah.
You really do.
Yeah.
Students need feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Their first time to give them that feedback. But if they don't get that specific reaction to what they wrote, so the next time they challenge things it's very hard. So I don't know. People have to trade off things.
I think that's what it is. And again, it comes back to the learning outcomes. So do we really need them to write that 20-page, research paper at the end? What if instead of that, they wrote a 5-page paper at the end and, we did, more critical reflection throughout the semester? And it's just one really, really simple idea. But I guess, a number of the reflection activities can happen right inside the classroom. And then the other thing is if there's not time in class, is this whole flipping the classroom phenomenon, whereby why do we believe that students can only learn by lectures that we do in class? Why can't, we can record lectures, they can listen to TED Talks, there's all kinds of things that they can do to learn course content outside of class and then use class time instead of delivering lectures, I pitch, you catch, in actually doing the activities that are based on the material. There's no reason why we can't do that. Just we don't generally think to do that. Yeah.
What kind of
And then I see
suggestions do
Carrie,
you have working with students who may be very resistant to this?
Well, yeah. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them think, and that's part of the issue. I think the preparation piece is really important, and that's why I say if we try to tack critical reflection on at the end of the semester, they're going to it doesn't really matter. I don't. That's obviously not important. But if we integrate it in the very beginning, so how do you reduce resistance? I start with the learning outcomes. And the first day of class, I really go over them in a big way. I said, this is what you're here to do. And you need to know that I have very carefully constructed this syllabus to enable you to the best of my ability and experience. And I'm going to work really hard on this with you for you to be able to achieve these learning outcomes. If this is not what you need or want to do at this point in your college career, then maybe this isn't the right class for you. I also tell them that, I was an undergraduate too, and there are some semesters I really needed to take an easy class. I needed a gut course, I had too much else going on. I understand that phenomenon, but this is not it. And so I think part of it is to just be really level with them right at the very beginning, so that they know what your expectations are. And if they're not up for it, then they're going to know that they're going to have to live with the consequences. And so, but it's a whole nother hour and a half session we could do about how do you deal with resistant students when they're in class, making it challenging for others to participate and learn. That's a whole nother session. So I see one more. Could you have one last question? I know we're going to have to end.
Yeah,
Or we can do it later.
Because it's 1:45.
We can talk after, yeah.
You guys can, and
Yeah.
anybody else who wants to, please stay, but I know some of you have classes and things you need to get to. So
Absolutely.
If you want to go ahead and go now, please feel free to do so. If
Yeah, I
you want
do.
to stay and continue to engage, by all means do so. Unless if we want to definitely hear Michelle's question. If you would, make sure you drop off your evaluation form on your way out. And if you would like to get the list of the rubric references, there's a sign-up sheet up front.
Oh, great.
If you will just make
Thank
sure,
you.
please write legibly so I get it to the right email address. Otherwise it'll end up in the Ethernet somewhere. But
That
the
is
sign-up
great.
sheet's up there. So go ahead.
That is great. Yeah,
I was
Michelle.
just going to ask if you ever have experimented with making these reflections public or shared with the rest of the class, if they could each other, share or through some sort of public forum, blog, Twitter, anything, where they can see each other's reflections.
That's a great question. And it really, I am seeing more and more faculty members as our courseware becomes more and more sophisticated. Do you use Blackboard? Yeah, you can do it on Blackboard. You can do blogs, you can do class discussions, online discussions, do all kinds of things, discussion boards. But we're moving to Canvas in the spring, and it's even more sophisticated for that. So that it's coming more and more. But you certainly can do it on Blackboard. Yeah, some people find that it's very effective to do online or in class reflection and ask students to reflect on each other's comments right in class. And in my class, the Now What class, we do digital stories. And the students reflect on their own digital stories. But I had a situation where a student came to me and said, I can do this assignment and do my digital story and present it to everybody and get their comments, but it won't be anywhere near as useful to me, because if I'm going to really do the kind of critical reflection that's going to be most useful to me, I don't want to share it with them. And so I offered to the class the option for any of them to just show it to me in my office and do it that way if they wanted to. So again, it depends on but yeah, and so it's another one of those things that faculty are really hesitant about. Well, what if they tell me something that they were abused as a child, or something really horrible, and I don't know how to deal with it, and so. Again, we were Carrie and I were talking about that. Our students talk about suicide or hint at. I mean, so we need to. Yeah, I mean, you need to be prepared. We're opening the door now for critical reflection. But again, we're not. In most academic courses, we're not necessarily talking about feelings or inner emotions. We're talking about critical analysis of material and experience. So again, it depends how you frame it, but. And if it's the critical analysis, that there's no reason why they can't share it. But if we're talking about our deep personal values and why my grandfather's racist, now they might not want to share something like that, but they might want to reflect on it. So yeah, so again, it's all that's why I think your support group is so great, because so many of these questions are not going to come up until you're in the middle of it.
I've had a lot of students reveal personal things.
They do.
They'll tell me they're homosexual. They'll tell me they're a recovering alcoholic. And it's like,
Exactly.
talk about your work.
What am I going to do with that?
So I think it's the private versus public thing. And sometimes what
It
I'll
is.
do is I'll set up a space for both, so they can kind of choose what they want to share publicly.
I think that's a certainly great way to go about it. So, well, thank you all very much. I really learned from you and enjoyed you. So, thanks so much for coming and staying. There is more food, yeah. And I will send you those rubrics.
Yes, ma'am.
You
And
are
I have,
very
I have a
welcome.
sign-up sheet.
Take water if you don't mind.
Before you go, I would like to show you what I'm doing in my class. I
Sure.
think you might like
I'd love to
some of the
know.
stuff that-
I'd love to know.
I've been working with critical reflection in some teacher training courses for about the last year and a half, 2 years.
I'd love to
And
know.
it's to go. So I'll show the one everybody's kind of gone. I'll let you see.
Yeah, love to.
I've developed something that I call nuance creep in my assessments. Because the first one is just yes/no dichotomies, and the second one is the same yes/no dichotomies with one that nuance creep in, and then the last
I
one will
love
be
it.
the same things with more. So it's like nuance creep. So they're doing the same thing, and they just gradually.
That's how they learn. You get deeper and deeper. That's great. Wow, what a great group. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I guess I can
Oh, yeah, you can.
unmic now. Before I walk out with
Well, I
this
was-
fine piece of equipment.
I was familiar with some of your work before you had come, so I didn't give you this talk or make this announcement. But one during the lecture in classroom today, if you can. Oh my goodness! So we've had to stand up in front of people and say, "Remember, this is being recorded."
Oh,
It's incredible. I don't know if you're having that problem in your CTE, but that's go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to.
Yeah. Oh, my fault.